Episode 94, Crowdfunding Then and Now.
Welcome to the PR Playbook Podcast, the only podcast giving you actionable skills and advice you need to execute a strategic PR program. Warning: what you hear next may lead to brand awareness and increased sales and customer exposure. Now here's your host, Rinjini Joshua.
Hello, and welcome to episode 94, Crowdfunding Then and Now. We're going to talk about kind of like the last decade of crowdfunding and that journey. And today I'm going to have a couple people join me, Bintu Traore, who is our marketing manager at the Silver Telegram, and Megan Alba, account director at the Silver Telegram. Hi, ladies. How are you?
Good. Thank you.
Hi. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for joining me. I think, I wanted to have this conversation because it's come up in client meetings and it comes up in conversation, and crowdfunding has changed quite a bit over the last decade. The Silver Telegram has been crowdfunding since 2011 on the rewards-based side, rewards-based crowdfunding, which is Kickstarter and Indiegogo. And then, of course, later on, Start Engine and Fundable and platforms like that maybe rolled in a few years later to do Regulation A+ crowdfunding and non-accredited investor crowdfunding. So there's a lot of different nuances in crowdfunding, and we mostly specialize in the product side, on the rewards-based crowdfunding on Kickstarter and Indiegogo, but we've done a little bit of both. And right now we do have a Start Engine campaign in process. But I thought it would be nice to get us all together to kind of talk about maybe some of the misconceptions and some of the thoughts around crowdfunding and questions around crowdfunding. I would love for you guys to kind of weigh in on your thoughts and questions about it. So I figured if you guys have questions, we can kind of use this as a platform to answer your burning questions and any questions that may also be of interest to our audience here.
Yeah, I think this is great timing because it's come up several times in client meetings lately.
Yeah.
And we've had some new clients onboarding, and the first thing they want to talk about is, can you give us your insights on crowdfunding? So I've definitely seen an uptick in interest lately. I have a burning question, and I want to know, do you remember your first crowdfunding campaign with a client?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I actually use it as an example for every company that I talk to for crowdfunding. So it was a company called Stick and Find, who ended up becoming a company called Blue Vision, who ended up being acquired by a larger company, which is awesome. That's like probably the dream path. But Stick and Find is actually the thing that inspired. Well, I don't know if it inspired it, but it was a predecessor to Tile. So you know what Tile is, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's the predecessor to Tile, and to now what is, the Apple has one too, one of those little tracker beacons, right? The beacons. And so that was my very first crowdfunding campaign. I jumped in there and I saw something like a weird mention about it. I was like, this is such a cool product. Like you could tag, this is 10 years ago. It feels like 20 years ago, but it was just 10 years ago. Oh, you could like tag your stuff so you don't lose it. And it just seemed like such a novelty. And I was like, I bet these guys would raise, like they had one backer or two backers or something. And I was like, I bet these guys would raise a ton of money if we could send samples to the media. And that was like my thought. And so I found the guy, the entrepreneur who was doing it. He's an engineer, so he's not a marketer, and he just really didn't know how to market the product. And I was like, hey, pay me $1,500. This is like I said, 10 years ago. Pay me $1,500 and I guarantee you that we can get press that could raise funds for you. And that campaign, Stick and Find, if you look it up, it's on Indiegogo. It went to nearly $1 million. We were featured in Mashable, Gizmodo, Engadget, and we had video features. And the guy is so funny because I call him the guy, but I know him very well. And he was in China at the time, and he responded to me over the weekend, and I just got pitching, and I was like, this is a cool product, check it out. And it just obviously from at that point, it was really, really organic, but it was such an exciting thing to be able to generate this crazy amount of coverage for this company. And then they went on to launch two or three other campaigns right before CES. So this was like in November timeframe. And then they launched 2 other campaigns right before CES. So they raised like nearly $2 million over these 3 campaigns. And that was probably the most exciting, fun, because it was the first time. And so that really kind of paved the way for us to do a lot of crowdfunding for the years to come. And I mean, we were pretty heavy in crowdfunding till like about 2016. One of the only PR agencies to do so, because it's very, very taxing and time intensive.
And so you said that that was about 10 years ago, that
Yep.
campaign. What have been the major differences that you've seen from then until now here in 2022?
That is a good question. So, back in 2011, it was so much easier to get attention for a really cool, innovative product because it was cool and innovative. And now it's a lot of copycats. It's a lot of everybody. It's a lot of big brands. And now, so the main difference, the number one main difference is people are marketing with money when you go into like Kickstarter or Indiegogo. And I think that's one thing that's kind of like the unfair advantage of what people have done. Like corporations have bastardized crowdfunding, basically. But I mean, that's kind of what happens when a platform becomes well known for doing something like raising pre-order money, which is so much better than investor money because you don't have to give it back. Um, so I think that's one of the biggest things is that people are going in with marketing dollars. So if you don't go into crowdfunding with money, it is extremely difficult to raise the funds that you're looking for, those $1 million campaigns. I mean, that used to be like the thing. Like that was the goal, was like, oh, if we can get it to $1 million, we're going to be awesome. And I don't think people realize that it like 70 to 80% of campaigns failed. Like they did not do well, but you only heard about the successful ones. So then you're like, oh yeah, I can raise money on Kickstarter. There was a phase of time where we as the Silver Telegram would get like 10 to 20 inquiries a week of people wanting us to help them with their crowdfunding campaigns, thinking like it was just like a easy thing to do. And it's not easy. It's very labor intensive. It's very focused. You have a really focused message. So I think, yeah, the main difference is that people who go into crowdfunding now have money. People who did it back in 2011, like my Stick and Find example of the guy who paid me $1,500, we went into a long-term relationship from there. But so it was definitely worth me doing it. And it was my first campaign. But yeah, those people, they launched a campaign, and if it was good, they would raise $1 million. Now, if you don't have advertising behind it, you can't really do that. I think that's probably the number one major difference, but there's a few other things too.
I think that's a good point, because I've noticed a lot of times when clients come in and they're talking about crowdfunding, there's one of two things that they're talking about. They're coming in and they're very confused because there's just so much information out there now, and there's a plethora of different platforms and nuances and things that they need to understand. So either they're coming in and they've dipped their toe in the water and they're suddenly very overwhelmed, or
Mhm.
they're thinking about crowdfunding from 10 years ago and they're not quite sure how to apply or how to make it work with crowdfunding in 2022. So I'm curious, you're such an expert, you've done this for so long. Do you think the basic principles of crowdfunding have changed? I know you just talked about, you got to have money to do it now.
Yeah.
But do you think overall the principles have changed, or do you think it's just like the advertising and the overall results of crowdfunding?
Well, I think yes. Yeah. I think it's changed in the fact that the people who are in the game have changed. So you have to play differently, I think, is what I'm thinking of. Well, the principles of crowdfunding actually, no. Okay. So the principle of crowdfunding, let me back up. The principles of crowdfunding have not changed, but you have to play the game differently. So it is just the results that have really changed, the approach that has changed, how you have to cultivate your community. And then a lot of times the big brands that are going in there, they're doing it for market research. So a lot of people are using crowdfunding as market research. Will this product fly? Will it not fly? Before they make these major investments into furthering that. And so one of the things that we do with our partner, digital marketing partner, is we actually vet the products early on. And the first couple weeks of our campaigns, we actually do a whole testing vetting process to see, is this even going to be worth doing crowdfunding? So instead of investing, whatever, the 20, 30 grand that you're going to end up investing in marketing this campaign, we'll do like a $5 to $10,000 advertising test to see if people are even going to respond. And I feel like that's a test. Yeah, it seems like a lot of money, but $30,000 is way more than, $7,000. So it's definitely worth doing the research to figure out first how you have to adjust the campaign to make it work. And I'm sure Megan, you were on the Steer account. So, we were on this technology account together, and, that's what we did. We got stuck at the vetting process, right? Like that's kind of, or validation process.
We did. And it definitely opened my eyes to some of those more subtle areas of crowdfunding, and the fact that you can have a great product, but it's all about how you present that to the media, how you present that to the customer. And just like you were talking about with your first crowdfunding, eventually that turned into what we now have as Apple AirTags. But there was a little bit of lag time. And sometimes the client has a great idea, but it's just not quite catching on. And that vetting process is so important. And I don't think enough people realize how valuable that is for your time and your investment if you're going to be crowdfunding.
Yeah. And in relation to that particular company, maybe it was ahead of its time. So it was like too early, and so that validation period will also give you that knowledge. Like, is it too early to be doing this? Will people get it? Because, part of what we do in PR is to educate people on new products, new concepts. I mean, we're doing that now with a few different clients. So for crowdfunding, you have to remember that the general mass has to understand what you're offering. And I think that is one nuance that I've seen in crowdfunding campaigns that are successful versus not successful from our end, is that if people don't get it within 5 minutes, it's not going to be a successful crowdfunding campaign. Crowdfunding has to be easy to grasp, interesting, fun, exciting, all these like different marketing elements that are really important. If you're trying to explain new concepts, forget it,
I'm like deciding that I want to use crowdfunding. What can I expect as a business? Like, what should I know before going into it? And, is it a good option for anyone that's wanting to raise money or specific?
Yeah, that's a good question. So some of the stuff we've kind of covered a little bit, right, in this conversation, but I think products are always pretty tried and true. Products that are self-explanatory, that are just cool and nuanced, but you really want to have something that's a little bit edgy and different, right? Like you don't want to go in with the same old Bluetooth speaker, which I remember like in 2013 or 2014, I think I did like a series of like 4 different Bluetooth speakers, and I was about to lose it because like the media was like, okay, are you sending me another speaker? We were so over it. And every one of those speakers was the best speaker. It's just like, there can only be one good speaker, but yeah, so we had a series of like these very similar copycat products. So right now in 2022, let's say you wanted to launch a crowdfunding campaign. What is your key intriguing proposition? I wouldn't even say value proposition. Like it has to be super kitschy and different. Hopefully you're solving a problem that nobody else solves. And I know these are kind of like questions startups answer to see if they should go into business. Kind of the same thing. Are there other products in the market that are similar? And if they are not, like what makes you different? And then the video is a huge part. Like you need to have an awesome video. If you're going to invest in any part of your crowdfunding campaign, make sure you have an awesome video, not one that's like elusive. Like don't get a video that like doesn't really explain the product. Cause sometimes you have, I mean, I saw all the Super Bowl videos, the commercials and stuff, and some of them weren't even like, what are you talking? You're not even talking about cryptocurrency. What is happening here? So make sure the video is very, very applicable to the product, how people are going to use it in day-to-day life. That is, I think, the number one lesson. If you can explain how someone can use it in day-to-day life and how it can improve their life, very quickly and you're under the price point of $100, then I think you have a pretty good chance on crowdfunding. Make sure you have a good value proposition. Otherwise, you could do crowdfunding, but you have to have a really solid community base. So huge email list, good advertising dollars, maybe brand awareness. If you already have a brand and you're launching like a second or third product, that's usually a good time to do it. And then you need to determine whether you're doing equity crowdfunding or rewards-based. Rewards-based, usually product-focused crowdfunding. And then equity is usually, could be product, it could be company, right? Because you're getting equity in a company and not exactly like the product itself. So I think it's just, you have to determine what you want to get out of it. And then I always tell people, don't go into crowdfunding if it's going to make or break your life or business, because let's say the odds are really against you when that happens. You should not go in there if your life savings depends on it. Crowdfunding is an experiment. And no matter if there's a science behind it or what, it's still an experiment. You can never guarantee. It's like when we talk about PR and media results, you can never really, really guarantee that the media is going to 100% right. There's always that little margin of error, like that 0.05 or 0.5 or 5 or 10, 15, 20% that, it's not going to happen. So I think those are maybe just a few things that you can think about. Of course, you can always contact us if you have any other questions about that.
I appreciate the fact that you brought up like nothing is ever guaranteed, because I think there's still this misconception with a lot of entrepreneurs that I have this great idea and I can just start a Kickstarter or crowdfund it and it's going to come to fruition. Like, and if you build it, they will come. If I fund it, it will magically happen. So I love the warning. And I'm wondering if you could share, because you've done this for so long, a lot of people don't know what to expect when they get into crowdfunding. It's like this magical unicorn that just makes everything happen.
Yeah.
Share some of like the nitty gritty. If you decide to crowdfund your business, what are you really getting yourself into, and what's it going to look like when you start really diving into it?
Okay. Everybody who's in crowdfunding hates it. They might like the results, but they all are completely annihilated after the crowdfunding campaign ends. And I'm speaking specifically to rewards-based crowdfunding like Kickstarter and Indiegogo. But I also think it's very similar for platforms like Start Engine that are equity crowdfunding, because during the process, so I know founders that used to like refresh their browser like every 5 minutes just to see if the number's gone up. I mean, it's kind of like a crazy person's game. So you're constantly, and this is from the media standpoint too, for us, we're constantly changing the messages, trying to find the right tone, but you have this like 30 to 90 day window to do it in. And that's like gonna dictate what the rest of your year is going to be like. It's like, so it's very exciting. It's a lot of adrenaline. And I think that's why it's also so exhausting. And then it's like, there's so much uncertainty. It's like, oh my God, are we going to make it? Are we not going to make it? Even people who know they're going to make it, which I would always recommend, don't start a crowdfunding campaign if you don't think you're going to make the goal. That's a whole different conversation. But even if you know you're going to make it, there's always that sense, there's always that fear that something is just not going to go right. And I remember this one campaign. I can just say that my heart is like totally broken for this person. We made it, but it was by the skin of our teeth. And he was like, I told him like, hey, we need to warm up your audience. We need to do all these things. He's like, no, everyone's good. I don't feel comfortable emailing them more than like one time and blah, blah, blah. And so on the day of the launch, so much pressure. On the day of the launch, we launched the campaign. We sent out the emails and like 3 people responded. And it was totally flat. Like I felt so bad. And it was a cool little gadget. It was cool. We got some media coverage for it. So, I mean, it was nifty. It was a gadget. And it was just so disappointing. And I kind of knew it was going to happen. And I did kind of warn him about it as much as I could, but he was so deflated because his like whole community Like he was a business guy. He had lots of emails, and like nobody responded to it. It was really sad. And he's like, I just don't understand like why we didn't warm them up. We didn't tell them we did tell them why he needed the money, but a lot of people came back to him and emailed him and was like, why should you need money? You have like 5 businesses. And it was just like it became very personal. And sometimes that happens if you're like an entrepreneur with a small team. And so like it's just a lot of adrenaline, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of fear, a lot of excitement. When you hit your goal, it's very exciting. So it's a lot of emotional ups and downs, and then a lot of like just physical exhaustion of like people even as a PR agency, we're constantly trying to change the narrative, change the storyline, find out where the holes are, see how we can come up with a different angle to present the item or topic or product. So, just from that perspective, it's a lot to do in a small window, 45 days. We need to get you 9 pieces of coverage in 45 days. That's no easy task. So it's very intensive for everybody involved. You do have to have, this is a good point for me to bring in, that you do need to have like an account manager. That could be you, that could be the entrepreneur, but someone dedicated as the manager of the actual campaign who's going to make the adjustments and stuff like that. You should have a social media manager. If you aren't doing social media, you're probably not going to make it. You should have an ads person, someone who's managing ads, definitely someone who's doing media relations or PR, and then someone who's managing the email marketing and the backer communications. So I'm putting these as 5 different people. If you had 5 people, that's a great winning team. Not everybody has 5 people. So some people can do like, multiple things if they need to.
And you had touched on the media and getting media coverage. So I just had a couple questions regarding that. First, is it still possible to get media coverage for crowdfunding? And if yes, do you have any tricks that you can give us on how to get covered in the media?
Yeah, so it is more and more difficult to get coverage for crowdfunding campaigns. There was a point where like everybody blacklisted crowdfunding campaigns. It was like completely no. I remember when Gizmodo said like, look, we're not covering crowdfunding campaigns anymore. And I was like, oh, okay. So there are some key outlets that have stopped covering crowdfunding campaigns. If you see media coverage in a big outlet, it could have been a sponsor. It could have been or can be a sponsored post, which means they paid for it. So just to keep that in mind, a lot of times people come to me and say, oh, this was in TechCrunch or Mashable or whatever. And then I look at it. And when I look at it, I have, my PR lens, and it actually was a small paid post by Stack Commerce or something like that. Stack Commerce is a sponsored content company that creates sponsored content posted in reputable publications. So you could do that. But I will tell you from the editorial perspective, most large publications will not cover a product that is not currently for retail sale. Some will. So again, we do have like our list of companies. If it's really, really different and innovative, some people will make an exception. If the company has launched previous products before and has other products for retail, that's another like loophole that we can use, and we can point them to their website and then say, hey, now we have this new campaign out or new product out. So that's another loophole. And then there's some niche media outlets, like let's say for video games or like books or regular games. We just did this really cool campaign called 9 Arches, and we did a little bit of pitching in the lifestyle segment and the gaming segment, and gaming meaning like real world games, not video games, and in the video game segment. And that campaign did really well, and it was well received, and it was more of like a lifestyle story. So it always depends on the way you pitch it. And that's why, PR is such an important part of crowdfunding, is because you have to craft all these different storylines and see which one works and which one lands. So yes, it is possible to get media coverage. It is tricky. And for companies with a product, you need to have a prototype. You need not just one. You have to have samples. Okay, let's cross off prototype. You have to have samples. If you don't have samples, it's going to be very, very challenging. So again, this comes with that whole idea of like doing crowdfunding today needs dollars, marketing money. You need money to do the marketing on crowdfunding, because you need to be able to develop those early prototypes or sample units so that people know you're serious, because that's what happened. What happened was the media covered all these crowdfunding campaigns that never came to fruition. And who gets in trouble? Who gets the finger pointed at them when these people lose all their money, because in rewards-based crowdfunding, there is a caveat when you sign up and says, hey, this is not a guarantee that you're going to get the product. And I've definitely not gotten at least 3 things that I've paid for. So you have to know it's a risk. It's an investment risk that they will never come to market. And the people that get pointed at were those people, those journalists would get like spam comments on their articles like, hey, this never happened. How do I get my money back? And those guys have nothing to do with the campaign. So from an editorial perspective, they're trying to keep themselves safe. So the more proof points and credibility and validity that you can give them to cover your campaign, that it's going to be successful, that you're coming to market no matter what, that this is just like a benchmark that you're doing, then the more likely it is that they will actually cover the campaign. And I can tell you, just even from a PR perspective, I've gotten a lot of angry phone calls from people like, where's this person? How can you support this person? I'm like, I didn't know they weren't going to deliver. Like, I don't know where these people are. We're a company. So unfortunately, when you're like, that everybody has to be cautious about getting involved with crowdfunding. And that's why we're so honest. Like, I know Megan's been in a few of these calls where like, I'm very, very transparent with what I say about crowdfunding, because I don't want us to get dinged and I don't want them to feel like they were duped either. And I know when you're working in that crowdfunding space, everyone's pretty transparent because everybody knows it's a very like risky, volatile situation. So yeah. So I think we probably should answer like maybe one more question.
Okay, so I have a question about equity crowdfunding because that is fairly new and it's come out, just over the past few years. And we actually have a client right now who's doing equity crowdfunding. Right. So can you talk just a little bit about what it is and how that has kind of changed the crowdfunding game? And if that's changed, especially in the media, any perceptions about covering crowdfunding?
So equity crowdfunding is like a little bit of a different game, right? Because you're getting ownership in a company versus getting a product. So you're just pre-ordering or paying for a product. So this is where you're giving away shares. Start Engine is a really good example. Fundable is a really good example of equity crowdfunding. So what happened is that there was a kind of a bill that was passed that's called a Regulation A+, and that allows for investors that are non-accredited to be able to raise money up to $1 million, I think, in California. And then there's like there's some other crowdfunding exceptions and tiers. So you can like start at 1 million, then go to 5 million, then go to 20 million in a certain period of time from non-accredited investors. And so a lot of startups have kind of piggybacked on that to say, hey, not only can I give crowdfunding or equity to friends and family, which is usually the very first round that happens, but friends and family and non-accredited investors, but now I can offer our services, our value proposition to our community. And so I think that's why, people have gravitated towards the Regulation A+, which was passed, I think, in 2012. And it was like, it was the Jobs Act, basically, giving people that are unaccredited the opportunity to jump in on investments that are 5 million or under. They still have some requirements. You still have to do a minimum amount of investment, and that depends on the individual crowdfunding campaign. So I think I've seen some start at like $10, like for a share. And then I think our client is like $100 minimum. So the startup has the flexibility to set their minimums, set their storyline, set their raise amounts. And then the investors have the opportunity to, dabble into investing into lots of really cool different startup companies that they think would be maybe lucrative in the future. Maybe it's a local company. I've seen a lot of breweries do this. So like breweries and wineries I've seen on Start Engine. I've seen a few drone companies, electric vehicle companies. So there's a lot of really different depending on the time, lots of different trends on what kind of companies are crowdfunding there. But it really just gives an opportunity to open up to your community. If you have a really dedicated community of people that are already part of your, like, let's say, email list or customer program, then they might be interested in getting in on how you raise money and get to the next level. And so I think that just equity crowdfunding really opened up the way startups interacted and engaged with their community, and has changed the perception of crowdfunding, but it's more of like an investor thing. It's not, I feel like it's changed the breadth of who can be an investor. And I think a lot of different platforms have come up, in the past, 5 years or so, that have given any person, any man, an opportunity to invest, making investing a lot easier. And gosh, I feel like there's a record number of companies you can invest in now. But yeah, I mean, I think the whole idea of crowdfunding from an equity perspective is a lot different. But I think a long time ago, my husband and I were going to do a equity crowdfunding campaign. I don't know if it was going to be equity or rewards based. I think it was equity, like to open up this like little shop, like a health food shop or something like that. So almost like not a Trader Joe's, but I guess like an REI kind of like community based health food store. And then we were going to bring in all local, local, what is it called? Farmed goods and stuff like that, locally sourced goods. So it gives people the opportunity to come in at both ends, the investor side, and to kind of maybe start something new for their community. I think that's the way I take it. But I'm sure that the startups that are more tech oriented, that are kind of larger, see a bigger opportunity in engaging like a wider range of people that are not making $200,000 a year, that might have, $10,000 saved away to invest, but they aren't an accredited investor. And I would just recommend, Start Engine has like a lot of resources to look into, what exactly it is. They will go through the whole process with you too. So Start Engine, Fundable, those are the two that I've used the most for equity crowdfunding. I have invested in just two, I think, so far. So that's always fun. It's just fun to see what those campaigns are going to do. And then if you do get in, you feel like you did something kind of exciting.
I think it's really interesting because, 10 years ago, the early adopters were the people who were buying these products through crowdfunding. Oh, we're going to have this cool new thing that nobody else is going to have. We're going to be the first ones to test it out. But with equity crowdfunding, it brings a whole new definition of an early adopter, but it really opens up the playing field for a lot of different, like you said, for someone who wants to be an investor, maybe wants to be an early adopter in an idea or a concept, or sees, like, for example, that, drones are really taking off, no pun intended. And that, it's a great opportunity to invest, but maybe they don't have thousands of dollars. So I really am very interested in the way that the idea of being an early adopter is changing from product focus to equity and community focused.
Yeah. And I think I feel like a lot of startups are taking that approach. A lot of people we talk to, everyone's, I think that the buzzword of the day is like authenticity. So that's playing a big role in, people are so sick of everything right now. So I think authenticity is like a huge reason that this is actually taking off.
I agree. This has been fantastic. And I joke about this, but every time I get on a podcast with you, every time we talk about one of these topics, I feel like I learn so much more from you, even though I've worked with you for years now. There's always some new nugget of truth that I get out of these discussions.
Thank you. Well, thanks for joining me, ladies. I think, look, I'm sure I can come up with 100 more questions for crowdfunding. And yeah, it's just, we'd love, I think might be a good idea to get one of our crowdfunded companies on here to talk about their like direct experience on like what the big challenges and opportunities are. But yeah, this is like a kind of an ongoing conversation. If anybody who's listening really wants to get into the nitty gritty or ask specific questions, don't feel free. Don't be afraid to email me at Ronjini, RONJINI @thesilvertelegram.com. We'll put a couple of articles. I think we have a couple of blogs and articles on crowdfunding, so we'll link them in our show notes. And thanks for joining us so much. Thanks, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.